Hello, Tanshi, bonjour, buzu, edlanete, Tansi, and Han. My name is Aimee Schwager, and I'm a mental health and addictions counselor at Aurora Recovery Center. I'm grateful to be here today with everyone in this room. I would also like to acknowledge that Aurora Recovery Center has the privilege of being located on Treaty 1 territory. These are the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, the Innu, Cree, the Ojibwe, the Dene, Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation. Today I'll be presenting about self-compassion and how it can be helpful for our mental and our physical health. So this workshop will be recorded and shared publicly, both presently and in the future. Since we will be recording this workshop, we will require verbal consent. If you consent to this recording, you have the option to keep your video on and or off, and also can leave the workshop at any time. If you do not consent to the recording, you have the option to leave the workshop at any time, or you can also turn off your video, but still be in attendance if you wish. We will also have some discussions throughout the workshop. Due to time constraints, we may not get to everyone who raised their hands to speak. However, we'll try to get to as much people as we can. And there will also be activities where everyone will be involved as well. I also have a moderator named Nicole helping behind the scenes with this workshop with the PowerPoints. Nicole, can you wave to the group? And she will unmute your microphone and select you to speak. And she'll also be monitoring the chat box as well, just at the bottom of the screen if anyone has any comments or questions throughout this presentation. So before we get started, I thought it would be helpful to review group ground rules to set the tone of respect, humility, integrity throughout this presentation during discussions. So the first one, I ask that we treat each person with respect and dignity. The second one, I ask that everyone keeps an open mind and shares the space for others to talk as well. The next one is to stay seated and try not to do other tasks during attendance, and try not to use your cell phone as well. The next one is to try to refrain from using substances, for example, smoking, vaping, and things like that during the workshop. Another point is that no one is forced to share or talk. Everyone is encouraged to share if they're comfortable. However, if you choose to not share, actively listening is also okay. We also ask that you mute your microphone when not speaking and raise your hand if you wish to speak, and also ask questions as well. The chat box is available at the bottom of the screen if anyone has questions, or feel free to use the hand sign as well. So now we'll go into a brief activity before we get started with our topic. So it'll be a gratitude activity. So I'd like you to reflect on one thing you are grateful for today, and when you're ready to share, please either type in your answer in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll read some of them out loud, or feel free to raise your hand and Nicole will unmute you to share what your thoughts are. So once again, once you have something you're grateful for, please share it in the chat box or raise your hand, and Nicole will unmute you to share something you're grateful for. So Colleen wrote a warm house, Sandra being back at work, Lori says my family, Allison the cold weather just breaking today. Some other people say their health, husband, is having some time for themselves, a job interview, just to be alive, that's also a great one. Sobriety and the ability to be here today, that's awesome. Some people are saying their family again, and also the weather. Is there anyone who would like to speak out loud their gratitude if they didn't share? Perfect. I appreciate everyone sharing and reflecting on what they're grateful for today. So now we'll go into the topic of self-compassion and your health to learn more about it. So I'd like you to reflect on a scenario for a few minutes. So imagine if one of these people on the screen are your friend or family member who is going through a tough time struggling with depression. So what kind of things would you say to them? So raise your hand if, and my moderator Nicole will speak, unmute your button when it's your turn. So imagining that one of these folks are your friend or family member going through a difficult time. So what would you say to them?
I would say that it usually does get better with time, and that there is people that you can reach out to, that even just to talk about it sometimes helps.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What else would people say?
I try to practice empathy rather than sympathy, trying to just remind them that I'm there for them and I hear them and I feel with them. Not so much that I'm going to correct the problem.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I like that, not trying to fix it, but just being there for them. What else would we say to them?
Would you like somebody to talk to?
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What tone would we use with this friend or family member?
Probably a calm and supportive tone, one that invited conversation, but not judgment.
Yeah, that's a good point. What other tone would we use with them? Yeah, so you all came up with some really good examples. So we might say things such as, it's okay to not be okay. You're not alone. I know this must be very difficult for you. I'm here for you. Now I'd like you to imagine yourself in the same situation, experiencing depression or going through another difficult time yourself. So quietly reflect for a few seconds on what you would say to yourself. So let's be honest, raise your hand if it would be a bit different and you may be more tough and harsher towards yourself. Yeah, majority of us, hey? So what are some examples of things we might say to ourselves? So feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat box of things you might say to yourself. So what are some examples of things we might say to ourselves going through a difficult time or struggling with depression?
Somebody wrote in the chat, get over it. Or Sandra wrote in the chat, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. You can't just pull out of it. Can't you just pull out of this? It can't be that bad. No time to feel this way. Other people have it worse. Get a grip, figure this out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. What tone would you use with yourself? So feel free to share it out loud or type it in the chat box. Critical, I see Allison said. Any other tones that we would use with ourselves?
Aggressive.
Frustrated. Sorry, what was that, Julian?
Aggressive.
Aggressive. Yeah, firm, unyielding, angry, impatient. Some other people are saying condescending in the chat box. Disappointed. Those are some really good examples. So you're right. So we might say to things such as, why can't I just get over it? What is wrong with me? I'm weak, I'm not good enough, I'm all alone. When we know these statements aren't accurate because the struggle with depression can be difficult. It's difficult to experience daily, and it's not a flaw or a weakness on our part. And we're seeing it more often, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic hit our communities. So in general, we tend to be harsh add more pressure and higher standards towards ourselves compared to how we would treat others. It is a common experience and noted in research that people are often much harsher and unkind towards themselves than they would ever treat anyone they care about or even a total stranger. So I'll leave you with a question to reflect on. So who says the rules don't apply to you to receive care, comfort, forgiveness, release of shame and guilt towards our own suffering, recovery, and healing? So that's where the concept of self-compassion comes in. So self-compassion is a promising method to help us in everyday situations. It is important to care, soothe, and comfort ourselves daily, especially in difficult times. Being a human is hard sometimes, which stresses the importance of taking care of ourselves. So self-compassion is the compassionate, non-judgmental, open attitude and response towards ourselves daily, especially when we're suffering. It involves treating ourselves similarly to how we would treat others with care and understanding when experiencing pain, failures, stress, self-hate, and suffering. So we have a quote on the screen. So it says, instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing yourself for various inadequacies or shortcomings, self-compassion means you are kind and understanding when confronted with personal failings. After all, whoever said we have to be perfect? So self-compassion involves being mindful of both pleasant and unpleasant feelings and emotions, especially experiences of suffering. It involves not avoiding or disconnecting from suffering, and sometimes we tend to want to distract ourselves or forget about our suffering when it's important to be mindful towards our suffering. Self-compassion also involves the understanding that we're not alone in our experiences, especially experiences of struggle and suffering. And self-compassion also allows us to offer non-judgmental understanding and care towards ourselves when faced with adversity such as pain, limitations, and failure. So another quote, through self-compassion, we become an inner ally instead of an inner enemy. So in general, we learn to speak to ourselves as we would speak to someone we care about or even complete strangers. So self-compassion can be a helpful practice to do daily. It also can have significant benefits to our minds, brain, and body. So there's many benefits of self-compassion. There's been a lot of research studies that prove that self-compassion has a lot of benefits to our minds, brain, and body. So for example, self-compassion has been found to decrease anxiety, depression, shame, and guilt. It has been found to improve resiliency, to better cope in difficult situations. And additionally, it may be a protective factor against negative environmental exposures such as stress and trauma. It has been found to improve our overall happiness. And it's also been found to significantly improve mental health, overall well-being, hope, and optimism in life. And studies have found that the practice of self-compassion improved individuals' emotional resilience, coping, motivation, self-efficacy, and confidence in difficult situations. So now we'll go into some more benefits of self-compassion that have been found. So it has been found to help improve our overall life satisfaction. Additionally, it may improve loneliness and foster connections with others. It has been found to improve physical health. So for example, with chronic pain and illnesses, and specifically with the components of mindfulness, it has been found to particularly improve physical health conditions. Additionally, the practice of self-compassion has been found to improve relationships, specifically with ourselves and others. It has been also found to be associated with low levels of negative affect. So for example, bad mood, unpleasant feelings and emotions, and high levels of positive affect. So for example, good mood, pleasant feelings and emotions. And lastly, it has been found to be a protective factor against burnout and compassion fatigue. So we see this a lot in caregivers and health professionals. So now we'll go into some more benefits. So self-compassion has been found to be helpful with health and aging in older adults. It also it might help reduce criminality as well. So for example, a study found that it decreased negative emotions, increased social connectedness with others, it increased mindfulness, empathy, and it also created some activations in positive brain networks that can be negatively altered in criminal behaviors. Some studies found that it may be helpful in life transitions such as adolescent phases. And another study found that it improved body image and self-esteem in folks. And lastly, there's been some associations with positive brain areas after practicing self-compassion and even during it. So for example, it has been associated with positive brain areas and positive affect as well. So now we're going to go into the 3 components of self-compassion. So the first one is self-kindness. The second one is common humanity. And the third piece of self-compassion is mindfulness. So now we're going to go into the specific components of the practice. So the first one is self-kindness. So I'm going to ask a question to the crowd. So what does self-kindness mean to you? So feel free to write it in the chat box or raise your hand and Nicole will unmute your microphone. Okay, so forgiving yourself in the chat box. Treating yourself like a good friend. Someone mentioned don't be so hard on yourself. Yeah, those are all related to self-kindness. Positive self-talk.
I think that it's practicing the same degree of kindness that I would practice with people I care about.
Yeah.
Often I discern the two. They shouldn't be different. They should be one and the same.
That's a good thought, Julian. Thank you. And someone wrote being patient with yourself. Those are some great reflections. Any other thoughts? Complimenting yourself to be kind to yourself like others. Yeah, that's a great reflection. Thank you for sharing all of that. Now we'll go into the specific component of self-kindness and what it entails. So a lot of you mentioned it. So it includes showing care, support, understanding, warmth, and acceptance towards ourselves. So in other words, the practice involves extending compassion and understanding towards ourselves, cutting ourselves slack towards our shortcomings. After all, we're human and no one is perfect. We would never say to a friend or family member or even a stranger, you're stupid, you're a failure, why can't you just feel better? What is wrong with you? But then we allow for ourselves to say it. So now we'll go into the second component of common humanity. So I'll ask the question for this one. So what does common humanity mean to you? So feel free to type it in the chat box or as well raise your hand and Nicole will unmute your microphone.
Hi, everyone. I really love the work by Kirsten Neff, and I think common humanity for me means that I'm not alone in my suffering, that everyone on the entire planet has pain, suffering, disappointment at some point in their life. So it's not just Donna who experiences that, and that's helpful to understand that for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Donna.
You're welcome.
And I see some folks typed in the chat box, being kind to all, we're all human. Sonder. We all have strengths, weaknesses, successes, and failures. Those are some great thoughts. So now we'll go into some details about some kind of components of common humanity. So common humanity includes the understanding that we're all human, we're not perfect, and we're all works in progresses. We all fail, make mistakes, and struggle in life, and that's okay. It also demonstrates that everyone suffers in life, and each suffering is unique. However, we're not alone in our pain and suffering, in which people can relate similarly to you. This is especially highlighted with the COVID-19 pandemic. So now we'll go into the last component of mindfulness. So what does mindfulness mean to you? So feel free to write it in the chat box or raise your hands and Nicole will unmute you. So someone wrote living in the present moment. Yeah. Being as present as possible in every moment. Any other thoughts? Being present and not thinking about the past or future, someone wrote. Those are some good examples.
I think being the practice of being self-aware.
That's a good one, yeah. Someone wrote being mindful of other situations. Another one, current and engaged in today. Those are some really good thoughts. So now we'll go into some details about mindfulness. So mindfulness involves being aware of moment-to-moment experiences in a balanced and non-judgmental way. In other words, being mindful about our pleasant and unpleasant emotions, just letting it be as it is, not trying to change it, not trying to repress it or make it worse. Additionally, we tend to avoid or distract ourselves with unpleasant emotions, so experiences of sadness, anger, and grief. However, mindfulness allows us to just be with our experiences with whatever arises. Additionally, mindfulness can impact our brain through a concept called neuroplasticity that retrains and repairs our brain towards new pathways of well-being and growth. Additionally, mindfulness has been found to significantly benefit our minds, brain, and body. So for example, it has been found to improve mental health and overall well-being, physical health conditions, and it also has been found to create activations in positive brain networks in different brain parts of our brain. And it also has been found to be helpful to improve our immunity. So there's quite a lot of benefits with this. So another quote, when we are in the mind state of love and connected presence to the relationship with ourselves and others, the world is transformed. So now we're going to go into an activity. So are there negative aspects to practice self-compassion? So we're going to do a true and false activity. So for everyone in the room, I'd like you to do a thumbs up if you feel that the answer is true, a thumbs down if you feel the answer is false, and a thumb sideways if you feel that you're unsure about it. Sound good? Okay, so we'll go into some questions, and I'd love to hear some of your answers. So the first question, self-compassion is selfish. Do we think that's true, false, or unsure? So show me on the screen. So a lot of thumbs down. Let's see what the answer is. False. So giving compassion to ourselves allows us to give more to others. Research studies have found that compassionate people are more caring, supportive in relationships, and have the ability to problem solve effectively in situations. So let's go to the next one. Self-compassion is beneficial to practice only in difficult times. Do we think that's true or false? Okay, so I see some thumbs down for false. Anyone think that's true? Okay, and some people in the chat box are saying false. So let's see so the answer is false. So practicing self-compassion daily can have significant benefits to our minds, brain, and body, as discussed earlier. So it's not just a practice we can do at difficult times, it's beneficial for us to practice just in general in our day. So the next question. Self-compassion can help me feel not alone in my experiences. Do we think this is true or false? So I see some thumbs up. Any thumbs down? So lots of thumbs up. So let's see the answer. True. So self-compassion allows us to reflect about our common experiences as a human being with other people, and that we're not alone in our experiences, especially in difficult times. So now we'll do another question. This one might be a tricky one. So self-compassion and self-esteem are the same thing. Do we think this is true or false? I see some people saying false. Is there anyone who thinks it's true or unsure? Okay, so let's see what that answer is. So false. So we will discuss the difference between the two concepts coming up very shortly, because there's a bit of detail that's important to talk about. The next question. So pressuring and being hard on myself with shame, guilt, and suffering is helpful to get results. Do we think this is true or false? I see some people on the fence, some people saying false. What are other people's answers? Seems like this one's a challenging one. So let's see what the answer is for this. So false. So self-compassion allows us to show care and understanding towards our mistakes, shortcomings, failures, and suffering. It allows a safe space for us to reflect on our experiences and how we can grow from it moving forward. We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward. It also acknowledges that we're all works in progress, and that's okay. Okay, so next question. The rules don't apply to me to practicing self-compassion when faced with stress, pressure, and failure. Do we think this is true or false? So false. What are some other people saying? What are some other people saying? So mostly false. Is there anyone saying true or unsure? False. Okay. So let's see what the answer is. False. So why don't you deserve kindness, care, and comfort in difficult times? We all deserve to experience that. We may have heard different messages growing up or in adulthood that contradict this statement. However, I'll leave you with a question. Again, why don't the rules apply to you to receive care, comfort, compassion, and acceptance in daily life? Now we'll move on to the next one. So practicing self-compassion means I'm not strong. Is this true or false? So I see some thumbs down. Any other thoughts? False. Okay, so let's see what this answer is. False. So self-compassion can be a reliable tool, increasing inner strength, resilience, and courage in daily life, especially in difficult times. So let's see what the next question is. Self-compassion is an excuse for bad behavior. Is this true or false? Let's see. So some people are saying false. What are some people saying? So thumbs up if it's true, thumbs down, false. So thumbs down. Let's see what this answer is. It's false. The self-compassion fosters a safe and open space to explore our limitations, personal responsibility, and growth. It can also foster healthy behavior. Any other thoughts about that one? Okay. So practicing self-compassion means I'm having a pity party. Is this true or false or unsure? So I see some thumbs down. And some people in the chat box saying false. So let's see what this answer is. So false, yeah. So self-compassion recognizes that being human is hard sometimes. Everyone suffers at some point in life, and it allows for us to be reflective in our thoughts and behaviors instead of wallowing in unhelpful attitudes, making it worse. Now we'll go back to the main question that we talked about earlier. So are there negative aspects practicing self-compassion? So the answer is no. So now we're going to go into what self-compassion is not. So studies have found that self-compassion has been found to not be associated with three key words. So self-pity, self-indulgence, and over-identification. So now we'll go into briefly talking about what each component, contrasting each component with self-compassion. So self-pity. So self-pity suggests that we tend to isolate ourselves in difficult situations. However, the practice of self-compassion can help make it easier and lighter on us, allow us to connect with us, and not feel alone in our suffering. Self-pity suggests that we tend to spiral in our thoughts and emotions and be reactive in difficult situations. However, self-compassion allows us to be more reflective and balanced in situations by taking a step back instead of acting impulsively and with our initial thoughts and emotions. So now I'll go into the second piece, contrasting self-indulgence with self-compassion. So self-indulgence suggests that it's selfish to show compassion towards ourselves all of the time. However, self-compassion contradicts this argument because we can't care for others if we're not taken care of and burnt out ourselves. Self-compassion allows us the time to care and comfort ourselves, so you have the energy and the ability to care for others. Additionally, self-indulgence suggests that we're not holding ourselves accountable in life by letting ourselves off the hook with failures, shortcomings, and difficult experiences. However, self-compassion fosters a safe and comforting environment to explore our mistakes, limitations, and personal growth. So now we'll go into some more pieces contrasting self-indulgence with self-compassion. So self-indulgence suggests that there will be difficulty giving up unhealthy habits. However, self-compassion allows us to follow our heart more often and reflect about what will nourish our soul, what will make us happy and healthy, both presently and long term. Self-indulgence suggests that pressuring ourselves in suffering and shame will create action. However, self-compassion allows for personal growth by fostering a compassionate, safe, and reflective mindset and behavior. So now we'll go into the last component, contrasting self-esteem with self-compassion. So self-esteem tends to focus on how different we are from others. However, self-compassion allows us to reflect on the aspect of common humanity, that we're not alone in our experiences and qualities. Additionally, we may face pressures and not feel good enough and have difficulty if we don't align with the stereotypical societal norm. However, self-compassion allows us to embrace our unique qualities and offer compassion and acceptance towards it, especially with pieces we're not happy with about ourselves. It also acknowledges that we're all imperfect and that's okay. And so some more detail about contrasting self-compassion with self-esteem. So self-esteem tends to be based on external circumstances, whereas self-compassion can be readily available anytime, especially in difficult times. And lastly, when contrasting self-esteem with self-compassion, people who practice self-compassion tend to have higher emotional resilience, caring relationships with themselves and others, and have more accurate beliefs in oneself with their own self-worth and self-efficacy. So we may ask ourselves, why is it hard for us to practice self-compassion? So there's actually a variety of factors contributing to the difficulty to practice self-compassion, and we're going to go through some examples. So the first one, societal pressures. So sometimes we face pressures in society to be perfect, to meet a certain stereotypical standard, and labeling us as a failure and not good enough if we don't align with it. Another example is stigma. So stigma towards mental health and addictions can impact this practice due to the pressures and judgments we face in our experiences of that. Another example can be trauma. So traumatic experiences throughout your life can impact your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. For example, maybe more critical towards yourself and feel like you deserve to be punished with shame and negative self-talk. Another example is it could be a protective mechanism from human experiences of suffering. So for example, some people may have learned that being critical towards ourselves protects us from harm and feeling the emotion in the situation. Another example could be that experiences and teaching shared with us as a child and an adult. So for example, we may have learned growing up to get our shit together, that it wasn't okay to experience unpleasant emotions. However, it's okay to not be okay, and it's important to be mindful of both those pleasant and unpleasant emotions. And you may also have learned that being critical towards yourself achieves results. However, this tends to create more harm towards yourself. And lastly, another example is the expectations of ourselves. So we may hold higher standards and expectations towards ourselves, especially in times of failure, inadequacies, and suffering. So now we'll go into some tips about how we can incorporate self-compassion into our daily life. So the first important piece is to understand that self-compassion is unique to you. You have to find a practice that works for you. What works for other people may not work for you, and that's okay. It's important to keep an open mind, though, with the practice instead of quickly disregarding components. Additionally, it takes time to practice, so we tend to want quick fixes for it to work today or tomorrow. However, it's important to understand that practices take time, and that's okay. So some more tips. So the first one, reflect about how you treat others compared to yourself. So it's important to notice differences and see where improvements may need to be made. So for example, are you kinder and gentler with other people compared to yourself? Do you help take care of other people and forget to take care of yourself? We see this a lot in caregiver roles. Another one is to become familiar with the components of self-compassion and how you can incorporate it into your life. So self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So for example, are you addressing more of one component and lacking in the others? Are you lacking in all of them and wanting to incorporate them into your daily life? It's also important to note to start small, because we tend to want to start big and say, I want to incorporate all of these components, but then sometimes It's just easier to set some more realistic goals that are attainable. So the next one, reflect on your self-talk. So do you tend to have a critical voice towards yourself in difficult times? Do your thoughts tend to spiral down a rabbit hole and feel overwhelmed? So one example to do this is to challenge our negative thoughts. So for example, it might be helpful to be a detective with our thoughts, asking ourselves, is it true? Is this helpful? What are the facts of the situation? How am I feeling right now? Am I missing anything in this situation? How can I be more reflective instead of reactive right now? The next one is mindful awareness of emotions. So we tend to either distract or avoid unpleasant emotions such as sadness, anger, grief, stress, and other examples. However, it's okay to be not okay and important to be mindful of both our pleasant and unpleasant emotions, not disconnecting from them, not amplifying it, but just being with it in the moment and using your coping tools and resources to help. Another example could be to create daily self-care check-ins. So am I meeting my needs mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? Am I meeting more in one specific area, but not in the other? Is there anything missing or requiring adjustments? Another tip is to respond to experiences with reflection instead of a reactive response. So in the heat of the moment, we tend to be reactive instead of thinking before we speak and behave. Whereas self-compassion teaches us to reflect, taking a step back in situations and having a clear and balanced perspective and actions. So a tool that may be helpful with this to be more reflective is a DBT therapy tool called the STOP technique. So the first letter, it's S, so it stands for stop. So for example, some people might shout stop out loud. They might shout stop in their head. They might visualize a stop sign, freeze in their place. And this can be helpful to stay in control. Is there any other examples of what we feel might be missing with the stop for this component? So we'll now move on to the T. So T stands for take a step back. So instead of reacting right away with our immediate thoughts and emotions, it's important to pause, maybe take a few deep breaths, take a break. Is this something worth your energy or something to let go of? And this can be helpful for us to not act on impulse. Can we think of any other examples that are missing from the take a step back piece? So now we'll go to the O. So the O stands for observe. So what is in your surroundings in that moment? How are you feeling mentally? How is my body feeling physically right now? What are others saying or doing? Can we think of anything else that's missing from those examples? Oh, and someone wrote think in the chat box. And so the last one, the P, it stands for proceed mindfully. So some examples could be to be reflective with our thoughts, the situation, being aware of our feelings, other people's feelings, and the facts of the situation. Can we think of any other examples for this one? So now we'll go into some more tips. So another tip is to ask ourselves daily and moment to moment, what do I need right now? So this could be as simple as getting a glass of water, having a nap, going to the bathroom. It could just be really simple instead of making it something big and maybe unrealistic. Another example is taking it day by day, moment to moment if needed. So sometimes we can only tolerate taking it minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and that's okay. You have to do what works best for you. And so another example is acknowledging your strengths. And it's especially important to acknowledge small successes. So for example, we tend to not acknowledge little successes in our life, such as waking up in the morning, doing basic tasks. They may seem little to us, but those are significant and they're actually really big and they should be acknowledged. Another example is acknowledging, embracing, and reframing our limitations. So for example, understanding that no one is perfect and that we're all works in progress, and that it's okay to not have that stereotypical perfect standard. And lastly, it's important to find a self-compassion practice that works for you. So some people, they really like mindfulness meditations with self-compassion. Some people prefer compassionate phrases to say to themselves. Some people, it might be helpful for daily self-soothing and comfort. So for example, using our 5 senses. So what is comforting to me to taste? What is comforting to me to see? What to hear, to touch, and to smell? Can we think of any other examples of some practices that are related to self-compassion? Okay, so now we'll move on. And so now I'm going to read a brief guided mindfulness meditation. So I'll ask everyone to just get settled where they are and make sure your feet are comfortable on the ground and arms placed comfortably, making sure your shoulders are dropped. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes when you're ready. Just begin by paying attention to your breathing. So taking a few long, deep breaths to get settled in. Now gently guide your attention to how you're feeling emotionally within yourself at this moment. Just note whatever feeling arises within you, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative. Whether it's strong or weak in intensity. These are all just emotions and all just feelings to be felt. Whatever feeling arises, remind yourself that it's okay to allow yourself to feel it. And remember that you are not your emotions. You are the watcher of your emotions. So take the time to just observe your emotional experience, making no attempt to change how you are feeling right now. You might label the emotion to yourself calmness, anxiety, frustration, surprise. You might describe where and how you feel the emotion in your body. So take the time to notice the physical signs that you are feeling the way you feel right now. Watch as the emotion changes in intensity and nature. Bring whatever image to mind that helps you be the watcher of your emotions. So for example, some people might picture their emotion as a wave, a train, a cloud floating in the sky, a leaf floating on a stream. You don't have to buy into your emotions and get swept up into them. You don't need to change your emotions, fight, or get rid of them. You are just here to watch, observe, and experience what is going on right now. See if you can make some space for the emotion, seeing it as part of a broader landscape within you that contains a lot of things, such as feelings, thoughts, memories, body sensations. And just remembering that your emotions are just emotions, Your feelings are just feelings, nothing more and nothing less. And continue to take deep breaths as you're doing this. When you have fully experienced whatever emotion is there, just continue to redirect your attention towards your breath. Just noting each inhalation and each exhalation, binding your attention to the back and forth movements of the belly as you breathe in and out. Just noting the sensations in your body as you draw your breath in and then out. Take some time now to allow your breath to be your anchor in this present moment. If your mind wanders from the breath to an emotion, a thought, or a sensation, that's okay. It's okay to thank your brain for that because it's normal for us to have our mind wander. Just give your mind the time to observe it and watch what you are experiencing. And once that observation has run its course, again, gently bring your attention back to your breath as the anchor in this moment. Continuing to taking a few deep breaths in and out. And when you feel ready, start feeling your feet on the floor and your body in the chair or wherever you are. And when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes. So now we'll go into a brief closing checkout. So I'm going to ask a few questions and feel free to share it in the chat box or raise your hand and say it out loud. So the first one, how did you feel about the session? Okay, so someone in the chat box said very helpful. What about others? Connected? That's a really good one. Great refresher. And so once again, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat box, as well as you can raise your hand and say it out loud as well. Someone wrote good information. Good, it's nice to see that we're not alone. Those are some really good points. Any other thoughts? So now we'll go into the second question. So what are some takeaways you've learned today? So once again, share it in the chat box or raise your hand and Nicole will unmute your microphone. So what are some takeaways that you've learned today? So someone wrote in the chat box to be good to yourself, to be kinder to yourself. Those are some great takeaways. To start small, yeah, that's a really important point. Stop, take a step back, observe and proceed mindfully. That's great. What else are some takeaways that we've learned today? So someone wrote that it wasn't new information, but it was a helpful reminder of things that that they've been neglecting. That's awesome. Sometimes we need that refresher. What about others? What are some other takeaways? The broad range of beneficial aspects of self-compassion. That's a great one. Recognizing our common humanity is key. That's a really important one, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Is there anyone else who would like to share? Was there anyone who had any general questions at all about the PowerPoints or the topic of self-compassion? Okay, so we'll move on to the last slide. So I really just wanted to thank everyone for their time today. I'm really grateful to be in the room with everyone and that you were here to share this space and to learn. So if anyone would like to contact me, my email is on the screen, as well as the phone number to the outpatient services where I work at Aurora Recovery Center. So thank you again, and best wishes to everyone.